An activist and has stood as a candidate for the Greens before, and Larry Sanders, who is the health spokesperson, and they're going to talk about the NHS. Stuart for about a quarter of an hour, and Larry for 5 to 10 minutes about reforms which have been carried out, what's been going on, why they think it's problematic, and there's going to be a while for questions, so up to about an hour or so, depending on how much you want to, how many questions come. You can talk about whatever you like, helpful, US election, or anything else you want to ask about. And so Larry has worked in social care extensively and was a Green councillor on Oxfordshire County Council from 2005 to 2013. And was leader of the Green group on the council as well, so has quite a political experience. It's not just the brothel of Birmingham. Alright.
Thank you very much, Oscar, and thanks everyone for coming tonight as well. I appreciate many of you have come here to hear Larry Sanders talk about the NHS and talk about the US elections, so I'm going to give a brief introduction, talk through a few things about the NHS and how things are currently. But there'll be plenty of time to hear Larry talk about everything from healthcare to the US elections, and plenty of time to take questions after as well. So firstly, thanks for coming. I apologise in advance if I'm slightly tired, but I've recently just come off several night shifts at Adam Brooks Hospital, and I'm feeling a little bit tired. So I'm going to count it as a success if I can get through the next hour without mispronouncing Jeremy Hunt's name, to be honest. As Oscar said, my name is Stuart Tuckwood. I'm an NHS charge nurse at Adam Brooks Hospital. I've been here for a couple of years. And I'm also an activist for the Cambridge Green Party as well. We ran this event because partly we've got Larry here to help us talk about NHS reforms, but because we think it's really, really important to talk to people about what is happening with the National Health Service in the United Kingdom at the moment. I'm very proud to work for the National Health Service. I think it's an organisation that we should all cherish and that we should all fight to protect. I've always wanted to work in the NHS since I was a student nurse, and couldn't really dream of working anywhere else, to be honest. I think it's something we should be incredibly proud of, that we've got a system that provides first-class treatment to anybody who needs it, regardless of their ability to pay or of their status in society, and that's something that is very important to protect. The NHS was years ahead of its time in terms of being established and providing a universal, comprehensive public health service free point of care to anyone who needed it. And when the NHS gets it right, it really does get it right. It's one of the best healthcare systems in the world at times. I think of some of the people that I've seen and some of the people I've treated in the last couple of years. Just thinking about this before preparing my little talk, I thought about a young 19-year-old lad who was involved in a major car accident near Cambridge who I treated, who had massive injuries, needed something like 90 units of blood to survive, was worked on for months and months by surgeons and by healthcare professionals in the NHS, but then 6 or 7 months later on managed to walk out with his family and go home to a normal life. And when you see the NHS get it like that, you really appreciate how important it is. I saw another lady, a young mother, who was also involved in major trauma, who had significant brain damage and really extensive injuries, and watched her recover over 3-4 months and go on to see her the first time. She brought her children in to see her after this major accident, and seeing the kind of way her face lit up and how important it was to her after surviving everything she went through, made you realise just how important it is. But also we need to really talk about how poor things can be in the NHS at times, and how what is being done to the NHS at the moment leads to really examples of poor care and to things getting missed that shouldn't do. And it's really important that we acknowledge that. We don't just talk about cutbacks and deficits, but we talk about the way that people suffer as a result of the cutbacks that are being made to the NHS. And what is happening to the NHS at the moment? I think it's very clear to say, and it's very important to say, that we believe the NHS is being deliberately undermined by the government we have in this country. The NHS is overwhelmingly popular. Something like 90% of the UK population support the idea of a general, universal healthcare system funded through general taxation and free point of care. And there's never been a political or democratic mandate from the British public to begin the dismantling of the NHS, to sell for services, or to make cutbacks in the way that they are doing at the moment. The privatisation of the NHS, the deficit and the cutbacks began a number of years ago now. It's not something new. The Labour government of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown introduced foundation hospitals back in the mid-2000s. These changes were opposed by large healthcare unions because they created autonomous kind of healthcare bodies and new hospital systems that healthcare unions believed would create a two-tier system within the NHS. But regardless of the changes then, when we arrived in 2010, we had an NHS that was still performing well, that was projecting surpluses around the country, and it was generally meeting its waiting times targets and its referral to treatment times targets as well. The government that we elected in 2010, the Conservative and Lib Dem government, the Conservative pledged their manifesto and went, I quote, "no top-down reorganisations of the NHS." Yet, despite that, in 2012, the Tory government led by, and the reforms led by Andrew Lansley, a local MP here, ex-local MP, put in place the biggest reorganisation that the NHS has ever seen. Some of the fundamental things that it put in place were that it broke the link between the government and the Secretary of State for Health duty to provide a universal comprehensive healthcare service. It began to allow NHS trusts to make up to 50% of their income from private patients. And it allowed private companies into the National Health Service in a big new way that they never had been able to do before. We warned at the time, one of the main reasons behind introducing the reforms was that they said that it would allow GPs to commission local healthcare services for people who knew, GPs who knew their local areas the best and would be able to provide the services that people needed. But GPs overwhelmingly opposed the plans and didn't believe they were the best placed people to be able to commission healthcare services for local regions. We warned in the healthcare unions and the Royal College of Physicians, of surgeons, of GPs, all warned that the reforms would cause financial chaos, a deterioration in the quality of care, and possibly rationing of care in the future. And now we're being told that the NHS needs to deliver £22 billion of efficiency savings by 2021. But I think it's important we have a fundamental discussion about why allowing private companies into the healthcare service isn't necessarily a bad thing in the first place. Because I think most rich people, if you were to speak to them, would agree that as long as the quality of care was being provided was good, that they wouldn't object necessarily to it being provided by someone else. But there's a number of reasons why allowing private companies into the NHS in such a big way leads to many problems, and I'm sure Larry will talk about the way private companies can profiteer in the US healthcare service. The government likes to talk about private companies being efficient, being more effective than running things than the public service. But what we've got in the NHS now, because of the expansion of private companies, is the opposite of efficiency. NHS services, the internal market in NHS, the way services are contracted and negotiated, costs the service between £4.5 billion and £10 billion a year, a huge amount of money spent on management consultants, on financiers, on lawyers, that should all be going on front-line care to provide quality care to patients. One of the fundamental problems is that the profits that healthcare companies make are not reinvested in frontline services. When the NHS makes a surplus, it's reinvested in services to make them better for people. But when companies like Virgin Care, who are their subsidiary companies based in the British Virgin Islands, make millions of pounds on NHS contracts, that money disappears to offshore tax havens. It doesn't get reinvested in the NHS. This is Virgin Healthcare, which recently won a £700 million contract to run services in Bath and Somerset. Private companies also like to cherry pick the best parts of the NHS to provide the services that are most profitable to them, leaving the NHS organisations to pick up the services that are unglamorous and more unaffordable, creating a two-tier system across the country that means you get a dramatic difference in the quality of care between the different places. We estimate the cost spent on management consultants in the NHS every year is about £640 million as well. So I think it's really important that we constantly point out that when they talk about the NHS making efficiency savings, they remember the huge amount of money that's wasted on financiers, on consultants, and that doesn't go on direct patient care. And we've also got the added cost to the public service, to the public sector and to taxpayers of stepping in to rescue private companies and private services when they deteriorate. Cambridgeshire and Peterborough has been one of the regions that suffered most badly because of this. We had the first private healthcare company to run an NHS hospital in the UK, Hinchinbrook Hospital, where the standard of care deteriorated badly to the point of being rated inadequate by the inspectors, and they had to ask the government for £10 million bailout of their services. Local Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Health Bosses also launched a way of combining to provide older people's and community services that was worth around £800 million as well. And despite that, the service collapsed within 6 months and forced the local commissioning groups, local health authorities to take on board a huge amount of debt as a result of it as well. And it's very, very important that we recognise that some of the companies that we're trusting with the care of our relatives and our loved ones are companies that have already got a really bad track record of ripping off the government and are providing very, very poor service when it comes to running other public services. Circle, we've already talked about their performance at Hinchinbrook, and recently a massive contract was awarded to a multinational giant called Capita to provide services to GPs, which has already deteriorated badly, which has been described as an absolute shambles. So it begs the question, with all of this of why the government's allowing this to happen if the results are so bad. And I think the first thing to acknowledge is that many of the people that are running the government and are running the health service now don't fundamentally believe in the ability or the necessity of government running public services. Jeremy Hunt, our current Secretary of State, co-authored a book in the mid-2000s calling for NHS privatisation. And a man called Oliver Letwin, one of the policy chiefs in the Conservative Party, also wrote pamphlets and policies in the mid-2000s and earlier calling for NHS privatisation. The man we've appointed as chief of the NHS, the man the government has appointed, Simon Stevens, was also involved in lobbying for healthcare companies and private health in the US for nearly a decade. And we should also point out that many of the major donors and supporters of the government are people and companies that profit hugely out of the internal market created in the NHS. Some of the big four accountancy firms like Delbar, PwC, KPMG are accountancy firms with much expertise in drafting legislation. They often take part in offering the expertise in providing reform and launching legislation, and then go on to make millions and millions out of the reforms that they've created. And there's also the fact that many government ministers and politicians follow that revolving door between public service and the private sector after they leave government. New Labour health ministers such as Patricia Hewitt or Alan Milburn both led healthcare reforms in the NHS and went on to make a lot of money from jobs with health companies advising on the reforms that they created. And many people who lead the reforms are rewarded despite the fact that their reforms are become a complete shambles. Andrew Lansley, despite leading the NHS reforms in 2012 that have been such a disaster, has now been rewarded as he's become a baron and a knight of the realm as well. So people have got really used to talking about the crisis in the NHS and the looming crisis, and I think people have kind of got a little bit too comfortable with the idea, but we really do seem to be at a crisis point now, almost a breaking point in the NHS, and I think it's important to reiterate where we do stand now. NHS trusts around the country face around an annual deficit of £2.5 billion. We've got ambulance services around the country that aren't able to reach patients in the time they need to treat critically unwell people. It was released today by the BBC that only 1 in 13 ambulance trusts in England are able to meet their target for getting to critically unwell patients on time. The NHS started this year with its worst ever set of performance targets. Social care in the community is an important factor as well, and something we often don't talk about. But the ability of social care to look after people and to keep them well and prevent them going into acute hospital beds is very, very important. But the CQC, the inspectors of social care and hospital services, now say that those services are a complete tipping point. And again, I think it's important that we don't just talk about the numbers and the deficits and the cuts, but about the effects on actual people in the communities. I've got here a very good report by a campaign organisation called the Cambridge Commons, which looks at health inequalities in Cambridge and the effects of cutbacks. And they've gone through the cutbacks to local authority budgets in Cambridgeshire in very close detail. It leads to things like people having their incontinence pads changed less often, people getting less social contact, or even vulnerable young children not getting the support they need to protect them from abuse or exploitation. We see that mental health services, something that are hugely important and something that I've talked about, are becoming increasingly stretched. Our man here, Anthony Carpin, who's covering this event for us luckily earlier on, tweeted that, what was it, Anthony, something like another 12 NHS beds for mental health in the region have been cut back, which means that people are being forced to travel up to 177 miles to access emergency services for mental health. And this is a real growing problem and something we need to address, and we need to have more services, not less. Just earlier on today, me and Larry met with some junior doctors who took part in strikes earlier this year. The junior doctor met, we talked about how demoralised and how angry all the junior doctors who work in the NHS are at the moment. It's incredible that we've got this energetic, talented group of young people who are doing their best to care for people, but being forced by the government to take strike action because they believe that the contracts being forced upon them are unfair and unsafe. The junior doctor we met this afternoon said that out of the 24 people she graduated with now, only 11 of those are left working in the NHS, and she believes that many more are looking to go abroad and work because of the conditions they're facing in the NHS. The staff who work for the NHS are increasingly stressed out. The amount of sick time taken by nurses due to stress has risen by something like 30% in the last couple of years. And the government's also taken on the fight to student nurses to remove the bursary that's provided to them in their training. I relied on that student bursary when I did my training to become a nurse, and I know that many people later on in life who want to become nurses really need that support to be able to afford the training. Now they're going to be forced to pay tuition fees at the same time as providing patient care in NHS hospitals. And then when they come out the other end, face huge student bills, which they'll be unable to really pay off in the short term because of their lower wages. We also rely massively on EU nurses and on foreign nurses to staff our National Health Service. And given Brexit and given the current political situation, many EU nurses are choosing not to come to Britain to work here anymore. And I imagine many of the nurses that I work with are probably thinking about the security of their career and maybe returning to their home countries to nurse in the future. So yeah, I think given all of that, it's fair to say that the NHS is facing a bit of a crisis at the moment. And what the government plans to do about it is that they've forced 44 regions around the United Kingdom to come up with what they call sustainability and transformation plans. And sorry if you say something like that and people just switch off immediately because it's so boring and so confusing. But basically what these plans are the way that the different regions around the UK are going to come up with their share of the £22 billion worth of efficiency savings they need to make on top of the savings that have already been made. In Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, that means that the NHS services we've talked about already, that are already under huge pressure, are going to need to deliver £547 million of annual savings by 2021, which we can all agree I think is completely unachievable without delivering rationing in care or without deteriorations in the quality of care. These reforms will deliver whole new transformations to the way NHS organisations provide care and the way that healthcare is provided in the community. And the fundamental thing about this is that you cannot provide transformation, you cannot provide improvements in the quality of care at the same time as you're trying to deal with the huge problems that we've got now that require urgent investment. So we should be saying to the government, yes, we want to, as Larry said on the radio earlier on today in Cambridge, we want to have discussions about how to improve the NHS and how to deliver better quality care, but we can't do that at the same time as the NHS organisations are struggling to stay afloat at all. So I don't want to depress everyone too much. I'd like to have a little time to talk about what it is we can do to improve the situation, what we can do to try and rescue the NHS before it's too late. In my job, which is working with deteriorating patients and working with people who are clinically unwell, we're taught to use an A, B, C, D, E approach to always approach these things in a logical kind of consequence and see what we can do about them. So this might sound a little bit contrived, but that's what I looked at this current situation and tried to come up with a way of how we could deal with the situation we're facing. And I think that A should stand for argue. We should be arguing with the local authorities and with NHS health bosses to stop these sustainability and transformation plans before it's too late. We've been warned that all the financial assumptions that they're making in these plans do not stand up to serious scrutiny, and they're going to lead to massive disasters in the way that care is provided unless we pause and unless we have a proper think about delivering them in the proper way. So to start with, we need to argue with them to stop those plans. And we were along at the County Council Hall in Cambridge earlier today delivering letters to county councillors asking them to prevent those plans going any further before they've been discussed with local people properly. B, we need to bring back the NHS properly. It's not merely enough to talk about increasing funding or in stopping plans going forward. We need to fundamentally overturn the NHS Health and Social Care Act of 2012 and back a proper reinstatement of the NHS. Dr. Alison Pollock, who's an NHS health campaigner along with the British Medical Association, backed something called the NHS Reinstatement Bill, which is going to Parliament again soon, which would overturn the Health and Social Care Act of 2012 and properly reinstate the government's duty to provide a universal, comprehensive healthcare service. It was brought to Parliament last year by the Green MP Caroline Lucas, but was argued out and filibustered by a number of Tory MPs who didn't allow it to be properly debated. We need everyone to back that bill, to say that it's not enough maybe to stand still, but we need to bring back the NHS properly, and we need people to put pressure on their local MPs to go and support that bill when it comes back to Parliament this year, backed by a Labour MP, to bring back the NHS properly. C, we need to properly campaign to protect our services in the short term. There's some fantastic campaigns out there warning people about what's happened to the NHS and asking them to get involved, from Keep Our NHS Public to 999 Go for the NHS to the People's March for the NHS, some of whom we met this afternoon. They're doing some really good work, and we know that the public's with us on this. They don't agree with NHS privatisation, they don't agree with cutbacks, so I'd urge everyone to look up those campaigns and get involved and see what they can do. And D, in the short term, we need to demand proper investment. Larry was mentioning on the radio earlier on that the NHS has one of the lowest investments in healthcare per head of GDP of almost any Western country. We spend significantly less on the NHS than Germany, than France, Italy, Portugal, Spain. And so it's not merely a case of throwing bad money after good. We just need to properly invest to provide the type of healthcare that we need and to relieve the pressure on the acute services and social care that exist at the moment. And the final E, and this is the one I like the most, is to evict. We need to properly throw out every single politician who's lied to us about what's happening about the NHS and who continues to press ahead with these plans. Some of the local campaign groups are doing fantastic work to scrutinise these plans, to try and stop what's happening, but at the end of the day, we're not going to be able to protect the NHS unless we throw out the politicians that are responsible for destroying it. So thank you all for listening, and that's my ABCD approach for hopefully rescuing the NHS. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. That's a comprehensive look at where we've gotten to and what faces us. And I wish I could carry on with the joyful ending, but the real truth is, and politicians are always fond of saying this is a crisis. Well, this one is a crisis. If those 4 years of enormous cuts goes forward, and some of the things I'll mention, some of the things that we've begun to glean as to how they're going to save all that money, and the consequences of those kinds of cuts, which will be an enormous increase in privatization, both with the kind of privatization we've seen so far, but also with increasingly people who in fact come up to me apologetically and say, you know, I'm sorry, I believe in the NHS, but I've had to have my hip done private because I couldn't afford to wait till I was going to be seen by the NHS. So we're going to have, at the end of those 4 years, indeed quite a bit before that, because it's a cumulative just happened at the end, we will have an NHS which is completely unrecognizable as now. It will not be a universal or very nearly universal care service providing good service, and in many instances excellent service. Up until now, whenever you've had an international study, the NHS has been either extremely good, often the top of the world, very good, and on rare occasions good. It's never sunk below that level. It will sink below that level because there is just no way that the lack of money can translate into good care. In the NHS, the largest cost is staff. If you cut the NHS dramatically, you cut the number of staff or the price that you pay, the wages you pay for that staff. There is really very little to reduce the expenditure. And without the doctors, without the nurses, without all the other people that make the service work, you don't have a good service. And that's what we face. So I don't want anybody here to believe me. I want you to ask us questions afterwards to point you in the right direction. I want you to go and study this because, in my opinion, there is no issue, no matter, public matter, and in many cases, private matter, that will affect all of us more than this breakup and destruction of the NHS, of the health service. And you will hear this kind of comment very strongly from other Americans, because people who have grown up in a system which works on the basis of profit know what a profit-driven system does to a service. In the very first instance, if you can imagine it, you're a conscientious doctor. You're working for a company that has to make a profit in order to pay your wages, in order to survive in a competitive market. And you see a patient who you think needs a certain service. That service is beyond the kind of money that your company wants you to provide. For very good reasons. They want to survive. What do you do? What are the consequences of what you do? You multiply that by millions. Every time you see a doctor or a nurse or anybody else, they will have two thoughts on their mind. One, whether their business can afford you, and second, what the right treatment is. So this is what privatization in a nutshell means. This is what private service means. It's very expensive as well, which I think, I won't go into that because it's clear from very many statistics that once the breakup of the NHS, in order to make it possible for privatization to take place, the administrative costs went up, as Stuart said, by over 4.5 billion a year. And that, of course, comes out of care. I want to go back, a step back in a way, and say, and partly as somebody coming from another country, coming particularly from America, what does it mean to a country to say, through its health service, we will stand with each other at moments of great need in our lives? And what does it mean to a society that says, sorry, we will not stand with you. You will face something that's critical in your life that may be life-destroying, but for you or somebody you care for, but we can't afford you. It's not just the individual, desperate that is, but it seems to me that a society that says to each other, we can't afford people who can't pay, has said something deep and destructive to its whole future. Now to turn more specifically to the cuts that we face. The kind of way that the argument has gone, well, yes, we need to save all this money, but we will do it in two ways. One, we will make services better integrated, that will save a lot of money. And secondly, we will transfer care from hospitals to the community. Now, in the first instance about integration of services, is quite correct. There's a lot of gaps between hospital, between GPs, between the NHS and social services run by councils. And as a county council for 8 years, probably the biggest bit of work that I did was working on those attempts to improve integration. And we did some improvements, and many more remain. But the key thing to say about them is they're very good, they're very important, they do not save large sums of money. In fact, when they work well, they cost more money because they make it easier for people to access care because you reduce the number of doors that people have to go through. When you improve access, you get more people in. That's the right thing to do, but it's not right in terms of, it's not efficient in saving these kind of large sums of money. So in my opinion, that whole argument is virtually irrelevant. There will not be large sums of money saved out there. The second question is you will close down your hospitals and you will transfer that care to the community. The crucial thing to say about that is we have no evidence whatsoever that that can be done. At the moment, there are tremendous hesitancies about admitting people to hospital, built into the system, partly because of shortages, because Stuart was talking about a hospital of 1,000 beds that didn't have a single vacancy bed. So there's already enormous pressures on doctors at every level about admitting patients. The methods that are thought of, well, no, I'll take a step back from that. The question then would be, well, why Britain must be oversupplied with hospital beds, and that's the reason they think that there's a vast amount of money made by closing them. And the quick answer to that is, in the OECD, the main industrial countries, Britain is second from bottom in the ratio of beds to population. So that means that it is very unlikely that there is fat in the system. If anything, Britain has pioneered closing down hospitals, sometimes for good reasons. Long-term hospital care is often the wrong thing for people, but we've done that. It is undoubtedly possible that you could improve, you could reduce some stays even further. But there is no room, evidence, whatever, that it can be done at the kind of sums. Because we're talking about 22 billion, we're talking about a current budget of about 100 billion. So you can see we're talking about a budget cut of approaching 20%. It's a little different to take it over the 4 years. But basically 50 to 20% of a cut in a system which has very little, if any, fat in it. That means that people who need, at current estimates, help and care in a hospital will not get that help and care in a hospital. They will be referred to somebody else operating out of some building outside of a hospital, which does not have the kind of intensive care and expertise that a hospital contains. Now, what kind of ways are they talking about finding those savings? They're beginning to leak out, and none of us will give you a great deal of detail because the crucial thing about these discussions is that they have been held in quiet, in secret. The beginning of knowledge has been forced out of them. There have been leaks of different sorts. There have been enormous local pressures in some cases that have forced, and in almost no case has the full appendices with the exact detail. Is essentially removal of the GP service. GPs are crucial, as you all know, to the current service. They're even more crucial to a service that would want to rely more on the community. But they are expensive. The discussion within that paper is not detailed. It's not a final decision. But it is talking about having a whole new set of professionals. These will be science graduates with 2 years study who will have, I've forgotten the title, auxiliary doctors. Has anybody seen any of this? They've got a title. Now the crucial thing about this is we don't know if there are people who want these jobs at the price, the wages that will pay, and especially in high cost areas. We don't know whether that kind of training is sufficient to do the work that's necessary. We certainly don't know how it will work out in practice. We don't know how they will play in with the existing GPs, which there are an enormous shortage of, but nonetheless they're there. So it is an interesting thought, and it is quite possible that there is some of the work that GPs do that could be done by people with less training. It would be a very interesting project, and I think probably many people in this room would begin to think out how you would have research that you would do in a relatively small area with backups so things can become critical, and with constant research as to how things are going, and an estimate at the end of where they've gone and what should be followed up and could be followed elsewhere. That is interesting, that could be valuable, that is not what is happening. What is happening is massive change in that kind of direction, very enormous changes that nobody else in the world has tried, being brought in very quickly, starting within the next financial year, and they will have their own impact over years to come, and I think they will probably fail. Even the ideas that are useful and interesting and could be partially successful will fail because they're being introduced within a system in crisis that can't begin to cope with massive change of that kind. So what I want to just conclude from that is really very simple. If these changes are not stopped, there will be the kind of consequences that we've talked about. We will have massive reduction in hospital care. We will have a whole range of new kinds of workers in the field that may or may not have partial success, but certainly not have total success. We will have increase in privatization in the current mode of outsourcing, because that's what's happening and will continue to happen. And we will have privatization that comes as more and more people buy their way out of a crumbling service. We will certainly not have at the end of it an NHS that resembles the one that we have now. My comment to you, not as a Green Party member, not in terms of politics at all, in terms of the human future of this country, that if these responsibilities fall on all of us, not because we're politicians, not because we're nurses or doctors, but because we're human beings, if we do not accept that responsibility and meet it, that we will be responsible for, or partially responsible for, a disaster which will cause, inevitably will cause lives in immense suffering, and will change the whole spirit, I think, of the country in which we live. I think I'm going to stop there, and I'll be very happy to take some questions. Thank you.
And now, any questions?
How are these things still private and no one knows about them if this is a national organisation? I'm sure everything has to be minuted and reported on and all this kind of thing. Like, how is it that plans going forward aren't widely available to the Republic?
One way in which they managed to... Yeah, sorry, the question was how these massive plans being undertaken at the moment, how are they being kept secret, how are they not minuted and properly documented? One of the things that seems to happen is that things are done in such a complicated fashion that it's almost impossible for anyone to follow who's not an insider. Reading the 66-page Sustainability and Transformation Plan that was unveiled here recently, even as someone with knowledge of how the NHS works, I was very confused. I found it very, very difficult to follow. And I think for people who are within the services that are being provided, or for the general public, it's very difficult to follow exactly what they mean with some of the plans. If I quote some of the acronyms at you, CCGs, SDUs, SDPs, it's very, very difficult to follow. But I get your point about how these things aren't being properly documented in public. There's been a lot of pressure from NHS England to keep these plans secret until they're formally agreed, because they knew that there would be a wave of protests and a wave of opposition to the plans as soon as they were unveiled. Some of the plans that have been unveiled already in East London, in other parts of the country, talk about closing emergency departments, talk about closing acute hospitals, and they knew that these would face enormous local opposition. So I think there's been a lot of pressure placed on them to keep them in secret just at the moment. Larry, do you have anything further to say?
Well, these things will require consultation, but of course they've had months now to develop these plans. into what those efficiencies might actually mean in real life. We haven't yet had that. But I'm hopeful that it will become apparent, and we will know why they have tried so hard to achieve these.
I think a healthcare commentator commentating on this recently said that there's two types of sustainability transformation plan unveiled so far. Ones that talk about cutting, emergency departments and beds in acute hospitals, and ones with massive gaps in the numbers projected on how they're going to make financial savings. And there are many plans also being published without full appendices, so we can't see the proper detail of the plans they're talking about, quite how they're going to save £500 million worth on the services being provided in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough in 5 years. It seems very unclear at the moment, and it may be too late by the time we find out. So we need to be putting pressure on people now. Yeah, sorry, I'll make clear, we'll take questions on anything. So I think, I imagine some people would like to hear Larry talk about US politics and situation over there as well. People would like, we're welcoming questions on anything. Yes.
I'd like to just ask a bit more about the NHS.
So, no, on anything, it's fine.
Oh, yeah, no, it's still an important topic. So I was wondering, within your profession, so nurses and I know especially amongst, for example, the trainees,
Healthcare assistants.
junior doctors, yeah, especially amongst them. I was wondering, do a lot of these people still vote Tory? Is this actually a thing? And maybe second, do you think the Tories are doing this with the intent of ultimately dismantling the NHS, or do you think that through sheer pragmatism, weird as it may be, this is just the consequence of it?
Well, on the intent on spending, those are the kind of questions that are incredibly difficult. And demands knowing what they think.
Yeah.
My sense is that for a large part of the Conservative Party, the notion of an NHS really goes against the grain. Because the deep principle is that everything important is done better by private corporations than by public. It is that price and competition are the key ways in which a society should operate. So the NHS really is an outlier. It goes against the grain of deep felt thought. So I think for a certain section, and I have no idea what, yes, they think not only that the NHS should be privatized, but that would be a good thing for everybody if it was. Then there are a second large group of people who really think and work every day at making money out of this. This is a vast area of profit to be made. Sort of previously in social care, what you have is not only you make a profit out of the services, which they aim at 12% profit in social care, but I think most corporations will have 5 or 6%. But beyond that, you have opportunities to financialize things. So one that's in my mind is Southern Cross nursing home company that ran, was the largest operator of nursing homes in the country. I can't remember how many tens of thousands of people it was supposed to care for. They divided, the clever sharks that devised the system divided up into provider services and rental services. And they guaranteed themselves a massive amount of rent to be paid every year, which the private providers had the opportunity to do their work in all well. In 2 years, they put together a system, they walked away with £600 to £800 million, and left the system, they went bankrupt, it closed down, and were in difficulties for a long period of time. So the profit element, although there are a lot of people who are doing this because they think it's the right thing, it's hard to exaggerate the fact that there are thousands of very, very clever, very hard-working people whose day job it is to work out ways to squeeze some of that money out. And they will be very well rewarded for their efforts. So in my view, it's a combination of ideology, of profit opportunities, and a chance for a government that doesn't believe in government to do something that looks like they're doing something. Is that half a question answered?
Oh, yeah.
The analogy that occurs to me is it's like trusting a vegetarian to cook a good the second part of your question about whether people in the NHS still continue to vote for Conservatives, for example. Obviously, I can't speak for 1.2 million people, but it does stagger me how many people will vote against their own direct interests when low-paid workers in the NHS have been denied, above inflation pay rises for years now, and they've seen their working conditions and their services deteriorate. I think one of the big problems is that as we've already talked about, it takes a huge amount of dedication and knowledge of the area to follow exactly what's going on and to follow exactly what it is the government are doing. If I was to say to you, we should have a 7-day NHS, I don't think many people would necessarily agree with that. Disagree with that, sorry. And if I was to say to you, let's give £350 million a week to our NHS instead of EU, then I think people would also agree that that sounds like quite a common sense approach. But in reality, of course, as the junior doctors we talked to earlier today were telling us, you cannot provide a decent quality NHS across 7 days with the same amount of staff. Staff are at full tilt, working full capacity as it is, and all you're going to achieve is spreading the services thinner across 7 days of the week and making it more dangerous for patients. And much of the evidence that's been quoted by Jeremy Hunt and by the Department of Health has been proven again and again to be misleading on that topic. And people, unfortunately, need to understand exactly what is happening to the NHS behind those claims. And I think there is a role we should be able to expect that the media will be scrutinising those plans and making clear to people more often what actually is happening behind those kind of vague, manifesto promises that politicians are very fond of making. I hope that helps. Anyone else? Yeah, sorry, people there first. Yeah.
You mentioned the NHS reinstatement bill is coming back before Parliament. Could you talk us through a bit what the consequences of that passing or falling will be? What it will do?
Okay. Have you followed?
Yes, I follow. It's a very comprehensive bill.
Yeah. She asked about the NHS reinstatement bill, which is coming back before Parliament, and what the consequences of it could be and what the impacts could be. Sorry.
Yeah. And it's got many sections. The crucial bit says that outsourcing that exists would be reabsorbed into the NHS as contracts fall due, so it's not a huge expense. Most of the contracts are 1 to 5 years at the most, so it could be fairly rapidly done. And that those feature private bidding would be permitted. So in that sense, it's a very simple, straightforward bill. It'll be very interesting to follow. I'm trying very hard not to turn this into a political party kind of thing, because it's quite clear that the Green Party is not going to be able to stop this by itself. If it could, I would make this a totally political thing. But basically, on the basis that I think Stuart has been saying, these are mainstream ideas. The success of a well-funded public NHS is not radical. So we have to appeal essentially to everybody. And the leadership, political leadership, comes through political parties largely. We will watch. Jeremy Corbyn has voted in favour of this bill from before he was a leader of the Labour Party to the present day. Before he was leader, he was one of 6 Labour MPs, so it was not a popular thing in the parliamentary Labour Party. There have been no votes since because the Tories have talked filibuster. But at the last meeting, there were only less than a couple of dozen Labour MPs there. So, and we don't know if all of them have been voted, but most of them probably would have been voted. But it's still a very small fraction. So we really do not know yet whether the Labour Party is going to turn up on this. 1 or 2 of the Lib Dem, small number of Lib Dem MPs have actually voted for this. So there is movement across the board, but whether it's enough to pass it and whether we can actually get it free of filibustering. In fact, we can get it free of filibustering if 100 MPs turn up. And the Scottish National Party, which has 50-odd, 40-odd MPs, is in favour of it. Plaid Cymru, with whatever number they have, in favour of it. So there is a certain amount of political power, and it will be very important to get it voted on, because then everybody can see, did their MP vote for or against? As it is, it's quite clouded. You probably don't know whether or not your MP is in favour of the bill or not. So you can't put much pressure on a person. Well, you can put pressure on them, but it's harder when you don't know what they're up to. So I think it's one of the simpler parts of the plan, because that kind of privatization is very expensive, fragments the service, so it makes it harder to work together. So it seems to me really very little argument for not passing it.
Caroline Lucas was very much in favour of working with other parties to try and get the bill passed when it went to Parliament last year, but as we said, it was filibustered, talked out by several Tory MPs. This year, I think they were keen that it was presented by a Labour MP, so that hopefully they can persuade more Labour MPs to turn up and support it. It was presented in July by Margaret Greenwood, Labour MP for Wirral West, and it's due for a second reading in February. So that's something we really, the Labour Party recently had a day of action on NHS, and they're talking a good game on it. We really need to turn that talk into a firm action to defend the NHS. So I think we'll be calling for cooperation. We'll have to work together on that. And if people can put pressure on their MPs to turn up and support that bill, then, you know, hopefully we can get a lot further down the line. But back to what I said earlier, I think the only real solution is to evict MPs who are in favour of destroying the NHS, unfortunately. Sorry, someone else was here with it, so
yes. I remember reading a story about two brothers, paternal brothers, who bought the rights to medicinal drugs used by the NHS, and they just hiked up the prices, basically, when they were selling it to the NHS. Reminiscent of that American psychiatrist Marcus Gray and the CEO of Mylan in the US. And I was wondering whether that is reflective of a wider problem, and whether what should be addressed is not just the amount of money that's given to the NHS, but also how the NHS spends that money, whether there are measures that can be taken to make it more effective, so that we can have better care overall. I'm not too familiar with it. Maybe you could just
But I don't know anything about the Patel brothers that you talked about. The NHS, as far as I know, is pretty good at using its purchasing power to keep prices of drugs and other things down. It's probably not as good as it should be, because it seems to me that there's very little reason why there shouldn't be a single national procurement service, and it doesn't seem to be, although they've had some disasters with with employing private companies to do some of this procurement. I don't think any of those have actually worked. So there doesn't seem to be a total overall. There may be a reason why that can't be done. But you're probably right, or certainly right, there must be many business, I don't want to call it a business, but an operation that costs so much money, indefinitely, undoubtedly have inefficiencies. That's not the question. The question is this massive change, and it is in fact in periods of change like that more efficiencies there.
there's an organisation called NICE, National Institute for Clinical Excellence, and they are the organisation that look at new medicines and decide whether they're cost effective, whether it's worth purchasing it for the benefit we get for patients and people on the NHS. And there's a lot of pressure on NICE and on the NHS to provide the latest, most expensive medications, which are still under patent by pharmaceutical companies. And quite often it can feel like they're being blackmailed into providing something that, with the budget they've got, will provide better outcomes for patients elsewhere. So I think, I mean, I'm sure in the US healthcare system, I've read quite a lot about the way that the way that pharmaceutical companies are holding healthcare companies to ransom over the cost of things like insulin and new medications, and they can make huge amounts of profit out of that. So it's not an area I'm massively familiar with, but I'm certain that there are ways we could look at to try and make that more effective, and also to try and stop the NHS being ripped off for the amount of money it has to spend. Any other questions yet? Come to you just after this man was here first. Yes. Yeah, yourself, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, great. Well, thanks so much for the response. Specifically for Larry, I know you've come out, it's on a different topic, but you've come out in support of the BDS movement against Israel, and I know Bernie, in one of the debates, was one of the first people to talk about how Palestinians are human beings and have rights and deserve dignity and respect. And so I'm curious what you think it will take for the Democratic Party to move away from its very pro-Israel stance and begin to...
Disaster also, it was slightly different, of a different sort for Israel. So I as a pro-Israel person, I don't think that Israel in any sense should be removed from the map. But I think that their future, both morally and economically and so on, depends on treating the Palestinians fairly, which means ending occupation, which means ending the siege. And I think Bernard has been very clear that his goal is the old established goal, which is seemingly drifting away, the two-state solution, which both states have what they need to be viable states. perhaps does lie more with Bernard's position anyway. If only that the younger generation of Jews in America, which are one of the more powerful lobbies in favor of continuing the occupation, so are changing. Their views are not the same as their parents. What is complicated, so I think if that were really the big problem, it wouldn't be a big problem. The bigger problem is that the evangelical Christian right, political right, is leaving out the religious part of it, but the political right, which calls itself evangelical Christian, which I'm not sure it's entitled to, but does, is even more wedded to the occupation. And they are, of course, a very powerful part of the Trump coalition. So, in one sense, there is a movement towards loosening that I think would be beneficial for everybody, and in another sense, a movement towards maintaining an even tighter control. Does that answer your?
Okay. Yeah, we take another female and then come back to you, Romeo, after, if that's okay. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, I'd like to know what you think we can do about, it's an activist question, how can we engage people? Because I've been really struck in Cambridge in the last few weeks how people have got out on sort of cold winter evenings to go to standing room only meetings on things like parking and things like congestion control points and the other points about the city deal. But it seems really hard to get people to come out and to take action on something like the NHS, even though, as you say, to me, I think it's going to affect all of us far more than the day-to-day question of getting from A to B. So it's a question really about how do we win people over, and why is it that it's so difficult? I think you pointed out that it's very complicated, and it's been going on for a long time, and you're quite helpless and powerless to do anything. But how is it that we can get past that and get people engaged in it? And I guess my other point was that a friend was at a meeting recently and was quite shocked to see how few of the people in that meeting, Cambridge students, were actually even on the electoral register. And, like, maybe this is the wrong meeting to ask that question, because presumably everybody is voting green. But I think that's another issue, the extent to which people are doing even that very kind of basic first step of engagement with these issues.
I think, as Larry's mentioned earlier, and one of the main reasons why they've kept these plans so secret so far is because they know there will be massive opposition to these plans. And actually, when people have seen their local services being affected and they can attribute a cause to that, there have been examples of really, really good campaigns that have overturned these kind of decisions. If I'm right saying Lewisham in London were very effective in overturning plans to downgrade any services in their local areas. And I think when people begin to see the actual real consequences of what these plans are going to entail, they will be ready to work with us and ready to do something about it. And I think it's, as people who know what's going on and people who are taking an interest in the issue, it's our responsibility to be really honest with people. And I always try and talk to people and try and make them remember the real issues behind all the numbers, behind all the figures and acronyms and everything, and the actual effects it has on people, which is why the work that campaign organisations like the Cambridge Commons do is so important. Because the cuts to social care, for example, are cuts that don't take place in the public eye. When a bus service is cut or when your potholes aren't fixed, it's something that's visible to everyone, but cuts to social care affect the poorest, most vulnerable people behind closed doors all over the country. I worked in Glasgow as a care worker for a number of years, and there was people who had their social contact cut almost completely, who lived in tenement buildings and could no longer get out. Old men who lived inside houses for years without going outside because they didn't have the care to enable them to do that. And so no one can disagree that those are really horrible issues and really need fighting. And I think that though it's difficult, we just always need to be ongoing and to make those cases to people. And I don't think I have a miracle answer, unfortunately, because obviously I really hope that before the 2015 election, the massive deterioration in the NHS would lead to the British public rejecting the Conservative Party almost entirely, which obviously didn't materialise. So we need to scrutinise our politicians to show the effects of their decisions, and to lead. And we also need to cooperate. I think there's been a lot of talk recently about progressive alliances and about parties working together. And the NHS is something that almost all people of the left and progressive parties, and not just people of the left, just the British public in general, agree is very, very important. And so I really hope that that's something in the future that's the basis for cooperation between political parties and moving up the political agenda. But I'm sorry, I don't think there is one miracle answer.
It's a complete puzzle to me as well, so I'm not going to help you with it. The only thing that I consider, well, is it positive? What happens when an actual hospital is threatened, thousands of people do turn out. If the ward is decimated, things happen, the number of staff is reduced, etc., you don't get that result. So the clever people on the other side are working very hard to keep things. On the other hand, the size of the cuts is such that there will be hospitals and surgeries closing. So there will be more action. Whether it will be in time, big enough, I don't know. But it might be that it's the only possibility. Certainly, if there's not going to be an election for 4 years.
I'll just say before we take one more question, if people want to join the mailing list for the Young Greens or also get more information on the campaigns we'll be running by the NHS, if you could sign up on the mail sheet that we've got outside on the way out as well. And I think Anthony Carpenter here would like to chat to a couple of people if anyone's got their thoughts on what they've heard tonight, and maybe do it like a little 20 seconds to camera or anything like that. He's usually quite interested in doing that. But there was a new question was next, sorry. Yeah.
Will the NHS reinstatement bill address the issue of the number of private psychiatric hospitals that are particularly in the field of adolescent care, where virtually all the secure beds are in private hospitals, in about a dozen of them around the country, so that if someone needs secure care from Cambridgeshire, Norfolk, Suffolk, they will go hundreds of miles to find that, and it won't, it's a matter of the staff having a phone round for beds, and then at times phoning private ambulance services to do the transfers. All this stuff is already been private for decades.
Well, my understanding is that as each contract with each hospital comes to an end, those contracts would be brought back to the NHS. There is a get-out clause in the bill that says that, and this may be the case because so much has been privatized, that if there's an absolute need for a finite period to maintain a private contract, it can be done. But the expectation is it will be a tiny fragment, not a huge amount.
Currently, there's virtually no private secure beds for children and adolescents in the NHS.
Okay. Thanks for raising that. That's not something specific I knew about, but I'm sure we can have a chat about it after. And if there's information we can find out, I'm sure we can have a look. You raised an interesting point as well about the number of different services provided by the NHS that aren't necessarily thought of as being frontline services. Addenbrooke's and Cambridge University Hospitals, for example, the staff serving meals on the wards and the staff that do the cleaning are no longer NHS staff. They work for a private company, and they're no longer, their wages and terms and conditions aren't uprated and moved up at the same time as NHS staff are. Ambulance services, increasingly patient transport services, are all going out to private companies, and that leads to money being lost from the NHS, and it can lead to deterioration in the quality of the service provided as well. So it's not just about the doctors and nurses on the front line. I think it's always important we remember that for that doctor to give you that treatment, he's relying on a whole load of people behind him that supply him with with what they've got necessary to provide the care. So we should be looking at the whole service and not necessarily just the very front line, what they call the front line. Great, thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
May I ask a follow-up question to the Palestinian issue? Or
Yeah,
is there
as long as Larry's happy to take that, it's not something I know too much about.
You mentioned earlier that the future of Israel will be dependent upon its treating the Palestinians fairly. But what incentive does Israel have to change its course, given the fact that it can count on what appears to be unwavering U.S. support? This last election cycle, we had two candidates from major parties, both of whom pledged very strong allegiance to AIPAC, to the state of Israel, and didn't really show any signs of changing policy. So in light of the current circumstances, what incentive does Israel have to change its course to treat the Palestinians fairly?
Well, I don't disagree with you. I'm quite pessimistic in the short term. I think say that.
Oh, thank you for being frank.
Is there some more questions over here? Yeah, we'll take this man first. Sorry, thank you.
This question is about the funding from the NHS facing.
Funding from, sorry.
Funding problems that the NHS facing.
Yeah.
Popular option to solve this problem is to simply pump more money into the NHS year on year. But considering that there are quite a lot of inefficiencies in the system, will this extra money be lost? So shouldn't our priority be to restructure the NHS before the extra money is pumped in?
Well, the first answer to give to that is that the NHS is, in terms of product for money, incredibly efficient. It is, as we said, it spends 30% less than other countries and gets outcomes that are at least as good in many areas better. So I don't think there is, it's a very good model. The fact that it's universal, that the administrative costs before they broke it up for privatization purposes were incredibly low. The evidence is that when some more money goes into it, the inefficiencies, the things that we don't like, the waiting times for cancer treatment and so on, dramatically improve. It does look like a system that absolutely can respond to money. I don't understand the reason why people in this country should think that this country can provide this major service for so much less money than any other similar country in the world. And I think the simple answer is it can't be done. The fact that we get as good results as we get is because we have quite basically a very good structure, and also because of basically of the enormous commitment of the staff. One of the things that a private, it's a lovely thing to be able to work in something like the NHS. I often envy you. You're doing work that is useful. It may be that in the capitalist world, the competitive world, it's considered that people don't care about the work they do as long as it provides the most money possible, but it's not true. Real people in the real world, people do enjoy doing things that are useful to other people. They do enjoy using their skills in that kind of way. And they do enjoy being in a position where they can follow what they believe to be the right treatment, rather than to have to be obeying the dictates of some corporate leadership. I've talked to many American doctors and other health professionals, and they find that work very galling, to be able to have to say no to people when they know they can be of use because of the regulations that guide them. I think it's just one of those questions that should be left out of it. Every organization, certainly including the NHS, would be more efficient. The NHS, though, I think the evidence is very clear from so many international studies, is basically an efficient organization. It is basically an underfunded organization. It is now an organization which is underfunded and beginning to be fragmented because it has different providers in the same area. Instead of 2 or 3 sections of the NHS, which are difficult enough to coordinate, you can have in a given area 70 or 80 providers, each with their own particular interest. What is good for one company is not necessarily good for another company. So I think that the privatization makes it less efficient. I think there's plenty of evidence over now 60 or 70 years that it's basically a good system, and there is no particular reason other than political ideology and political weakness. The inefficiency is in our political system, why we should put more money in. Throwing money at problems. You talk to people and say, well, when you want to buy something in the supermarket, you throw money at the problem. It gets solved because they sell you the stuff. Well, if you want to hire enough good doctors and nurses and everybody else, throw money at them. You hire them, you pay them an adequate income, you pay, and you treat them well, and you service them. I think I'm not going to be one-sided, impartial. Sorry.
I think you raised a good point about the inefficiencies in the internal market of the NHS, like we've talked about already, and how a lot of that money will disappear. But there simply is a very urgent and real need for lots of investment in local services, and the opposite of what we're getting, which is to talk about making more savings. The NHS is at a complete breaking point in terms of capacity. There's almost no capacity left in major hospitals like Edinburgh's or Peterborough. If there's a bad winter with a bad flu season, if there's accidents, if there's major disasters or anything like that, there is almost no spare capacity left. And so we can't deny that putting that money in the short term to hire more staff and to create more hospital beds would be something that we really need. And I always like to talk, when we talk about these things, about the difference between spending and investment. Because actually, what you get for the money you put into the NHS, and not just the NHS, but into public health, is the return for your money. And investing in healthcare, investing in public health, is almost one of the best investments you can make. It's an investment in population and an investment in people. In recent years, despite talking about the need to reduce pressure on acute services, local authorities have had their money that they spend on public health cut back in quite a big way. And they're projecting that in almost all areas, like I talked about, smoking cessation services, sexual health services, preventative health, mental health, they're spending less and less. And all that does is save up much bigger and longer problems for the long run. If people aren't able to access the services they need in the short term, the problems they have turn into much bigger, more costly problems in the long run. So we shouldn't necessarily think of it as money lost spent on the NHS. It's an investment that pays off. But thanks for the question. Yes, sorry.
Hi. In the Whitney by-election last month, the Conservatives won the most votes. If the Labour Party, the Lib Dems, and the Green Party, of course, had come together, they would have had more seats, more votes than the Conservatives. What potential does a progressive alliance have in a first-past-the-post system?
Wow. It's a good question. I'm in favour, personally I'm in favour of a progressive alliance, but it has to be progressive. I would not sign up unless, and I don't have it in my head, there were a list of things that we agreed on. And so in the Whitney by-election, I would have been delighted for the Conservatives to lose. They lost a large chunk of their votes. Their candidate got booed in 2 public meetings. It's the first time I've heard anybody booed in British public meetings. So something is shifting. But in my view, neither the Lib Dems nor the Labour Party and other Greens disagree with me were close enough to presenting what I could consider a progressive position. But I'm quite happy to compromise. The Green Party certainly wouldn't want to have all its policies endorsed. But there has to be a minimum. I think there has to be. We have to work together with other people and work out what we think is a basic minimum program. And if we had that, then I would be happy to fight for that, whoever was the candidate. I mean, other Greens have been even more open to standing aside. I'm going tomorrow to talk to where am I going? Sleaford. Sorry, I've never heard it before. With a by-election, and the Green Party stepped aside, and we're putting an independent health campaign on. The Labour Party is standing, the Conservative Party is standing, National Health Action Party is also supporting the campaign. That's the beginning of an alliance, because both the National Health Group and the independent person are doing things that the Green Party loves to support. So certainly in those areas we'll do it, and I think there's room for much more. But so far that I don't think there's been a really serious discussion. But if we can have a serious discussion, if we can have a real view on a platform, a common, not totally agreed, but enough of an agreed platform, then I think that would be good.
I'm really glad that the Green Party are the party that seems to have taken the lead on trying to push for this kind of alliance, because I think we can all agree that 2016 has not been the best year for politics. I don't know, I don't think many people here disagree with that. And we definitely do need to be looking at ways of working together. It's not necessarily as simple as adding up the votes in a constituency, because there are many people in the Green Party who wouldn't want to vote for Labour, many in Labour I'm sure wouldn't vote for Green. But in the Greens, in my personal view, is that many of the people, the hundreds of thousands that have joined Labour in the last year or however, many of them are the same people that joined the Green Party when we had our massive surge in membership as well. And polls have indicated that those people are very happy to look at working with other parties. In particular, I think something like 95% of Corbyn supporters said they would be happy to go into government with the Greens. And so when we have opportunities presented to us, I really think we should be exploring opportunities to work together. We can't be naive about standing down with a constituency. We need to be bold and say that we obviously believe in our policies and our promises, and therefore we should be getting something back from the other parties as well. But if, for example, in the Richmond by-election, when you've got a candidate who's obviously not officially being stood for the Conservative Party, who's being backed by UKIP, who ran that horrible racist mayoral campaign in London last year, I think it was, then I really think we should be saying, why are we going to let this man win? And I would note that many of the Labour Party activists in that ward, from what I hear, were in favour of standing down their candidate and trying to be Zach Goldsmith, but were overruled by the National Labour Party. So we really do want to try and make that work because, yeah, in areas like that, it will be the Labour Party that let the Tory win if they don't see a way to work together with other parties. And I hope there's much more mileage to be made of it in the future. Yeah, so I think probably about the last question.
So I'm an American. I grew up in New Mexico, which is worst in the US for healthcare. And it's my second time around in the NHS. I came here when I was 17. And I got to go to the dentist for the first time in 5 years when I first came here, so I'm a big fan. I think that shapes how I think of it, again, in these terms of sort of being morally right and important on its own terms, not just in terms of numbers or services that affect an individual. But in terms of how the debate is being framed for February, do you think that it's those local services, how this is going to be affecting you, how you get into see your GP, sort of arguments that are going to get people to contact their MPs, or do you think it's sort of those bigger arguments about what does the NHS mean that are going to resonate with people? Is there a strategy?
Well, question again. I'm not sure I understand, but basically I think in any which way that people choose to make their views known, it's a question of size. The public part of it, instead of just writing to your MP, joining together publicly is we validate each other. But people here have been saying, well, how do we know? Why do so many people not support? And yet we don't know them until you come into a room and there are lots of people, you're going to a march and there are lots of people who change things. So I hope it would be public because it does, it does two jobs. It presents an opposition and it also encourages other people. But any which way that people find complaining about a particular issue around the GP or whatever, or the loss of one or whatever it is, I think is also very valuable.
I think there's definitely a place for both arguments to be made. I've got some family in Ohio and America, and when I've talked to them about their experience of healthcare, injuring themselves and not wanting to go to a hospital because they can't afford the costs of giving birth and then being landed with a massive bill for spending an extra night in the hospital or the drugs that you plan to take. And I think we really should be honest with people that if the NHS continues to change and that's the reality of the system we're looking at, then that really isn't good. We should be massively proud of the fact that we've got an organisation that will give the first class treatment to everyone, regardless of their ability to pay. And I think almost everyone would agree with that. I think it's a powerful argument, and it's nice to hear from people who've had experience of both that they value what they get from the NHS. But I agree also that when these plans become a reality and when more things are happening in the local communities, then hopefully that's a vehicle for, before it's too late, trying to organise people to do something about it. Was there any other urgent quick questions, or I think it's probably about time to let people